He thought he left behind a trophy wife. He didn't know he just left the woman who owns him.
Hello, everyone. My name is Arden Fairchild Winslow, and for 8 years, my husband's family treated me like a woman who should be grateful just to stand inside their home. Then, on the night of the most important charity gala in Florida, my husband left me behind to wash dishes while he took his mistress as his date. What he did not know was that the mysterious billionaire chairwoman he planned to impress was me, and before that night ended, he would learn that I owned the mansion, controlled his company, and held the future of everything he had built. This is the story of the night I stopped protecting the people who had spent years humiliating me. It began with a crystal bowl breaking at my feet. I was standing in the kitchen of our mansion in Naples, Florida, wearing a plain cream blouse and dark trousers. I had spent most of the afternoon preparing dinner for my husband's family because my mother-in-law, Lynette, had insisted that everyone eat before leaving for the Coastal Vision benefit in Sarasota. The salmon was warm. The vegetables were ready. Fresh flowers stood in a silver vase. Every glass had been polished. Every napkin had been folded exactly the way Lynette requested. It still was not enough. Lynette brushed past me in a pale gold evening gown. Her shoulder struck mine, and the crystal bowl slipped from my hands. It hit the marble floor and shattered. The sound moved through the kitchen like a gunshot. For 1 second, no one spoke. Then Lynette looked down at the broken pieces and sighed as if I had embarrassed her on purpose. "You have lived with this family for almost 8 years," she said, "and somehow you still make everything look ordinary." I crouched carefully and began gathering the larger pieces. My husband, Blake, stood near the doorway in a midnight blue tuxedo. He was checking messages on his phone, smiling at something I could not see. "Please clean that before somebody gets hurt," he said without looking at me. The staff already left. I stared at the silver watch on his wrist. I had given him that watch after our 3rd wedding anniversary. During interviews, he often told people he bought it after completing his first successful development project. I never corrected him. That was one of the many lies I had allowed to live, because I believed protecting his pride was part of being a good wife. I placed a piece of crystal on the counter and stood. "I thought I was going with you tonight." Blake finally looked up. His expression held genuine confusion, as though the idea had never crossed his mind. "The gala?" "Yes, Blake. The invitation was addressed to both of us." He adjusted one cuff link. "Tonight is important for the company." "I understand that." "No, Arden, I do not think you do." His voice lowered into the patient tone he used when he wanted to make me feel childish. "There will be investors, reporters, hospital executives, and some of the most powerful people in the state. I need to present the right image." Lynette laughed softly. "Blake needs someone who can speak to successful people, not someone who spends the evening worrying about whether the napkins are folded properly." Blake's younger sister, Corinne, was leaning against the kitchen island with her phone raised. She was filming a short video for her social media page. "Besides," she said, is not going alone." The front door opened. A few seconds later, Sloane Whittaker walked into the kitchen wearing a fitted wine, red gown. She carried a small designer handbag and moved through the confidence of someone who had stopped pretending she was only a guest. Sloane was Blake's vice president of public relations. She was also the woman who called him after midnight, traveled with him to private conferences, and sent messages that made him turn his phone face down whenever I entered the room. She walked directly to Blake and placed her hand through his arm. "The driver is waiting," she said. I looked at the way her fingers rested against his sleeve. "Blake, are you taking her as your partner tonight?" His expression hardened. "Do not create a scene. I asked you a simple question." He stepped closer until only the kitchen island separated us. "Before you met me, you lived in a small apartment above a bookstore. You drove an old car. You wore clothes from discount stores. Everything around you now exists because of me." I held his gaze. "Do you truly believe that?" "I know it." Sloane smiled. It was not a large smile. That made it worse. It was the smile of a woman who believed she had already won. Lynette picked up her handbag. "Arden, try not to make this difficult. Blake has worked too hard to carry embarrassment into the ballroom." "Embarrassment?" I repeated. Corinne lowered her phone for the first time. Blake looked at me with cold impatience. "You are a good person, Arden. You are dependable. But this evening requires more than that." He paused. Then he said the sentence that finally ended 8 years of excuses inside my mind. Some people are meant to stand beside power. Other people are meant to keep the house running. I felt something inside me become completely still, not broken, still. There is a difference. For years, I had mistaken patience for loyalty. I had believed that if I stayed calm, remained kind, and protected the family from every consequence of their behavior, they would eventually recognize my value. In that moment, I understood that they had recognized it all along. They simply believed they were entitled to use it. Blake turned toward the door. Sloane remained linked to his arm. Lynette and Corinne followed. Blake's father, Warren, paused near the hallway. He looked at the broken crystal on the floor, then at me. For one brief moment, I thought he might say something. He did not. He followed the others outside. I walked to the kitchen window and watched Blake help Sloane into the limousine. Before entering, he placed his hand against her lower back and kissed her beside the open door. He did not know I could see him. Or perhaps he did know and no longer cared. The limousine passed through the gates and disappeared into the evening. I remained by the window until the taillights were gone. Then I turned toward the silent kitchen. The salmon was still warm. The candles were still burning. The broken crystal still covered part of the floor, and I realized I had reached the final evening of my marriage. I did not cry. Not yet. Instead, I removed the rubber gloves from my hands, washed them carefully, and walked through the hall toward the wine room. Behind a tall cabinet filled with old bottles was a narrow wooden panel that looked like part of the wall. I pressed my thumb against a concealed sensor. The panel opened. A private elevator waited behind it. Blake had lived in that mansion for 6 years and never knew the elevator existed. He never knew because he believed the house belonged to him. He believed many things that night. I stepped inside and pressed the lower button. As the elevator descended beneath the mansion, I looked at my reflection in the mirrored wall. I saw a woman in a stained blouse with tired eyes. But I also saw Arden Fairchild, chairwoman of Fairchild Capital. That was the name Blake had never bothered to investigate. Fairchild Capital was one of the largest private investment firms in the country. We funded hospitals, affordable housing, clean energy developments, transportation projects, and education programs. Our offices operated in New York, Denver, Chicago, San Francisco, and several smaller regional centers. Very few people knew what I looked like. That had been intentional. My grandmother, Celeste Fairchild, built the company from a regional construction business. She taught me that public attention could be useful, but privacy could be powerful. When I became chairwoman at 29, I chose to remain mostly out of photographs and public events. My executives represented the company. I approved investments, reviewed major risks, and worked behind the scenes. I had never hidden because I was ashamed. I had hidden because I wanted one part of my life to be real. When I met Blake, I lived above a bookstore because I loved the neighborhood. I drove an old car because it still ran perfectly. I introduced myself as an independent financial consultant because that was true, even if it was not the whole truth. Blake told me he admired my simplicity. He said I was different from the wealthy women he met at business events. He said he wanted a marriage based on character, not money. I believed him. After our wedding, his admiration slowly changed into superiority. The apartment he once called charming became proof that I had come from nothing. My quiet clothes became evidence that I had no taste. My privacy became something he could rewrite. And every time I secretly helped him, I made the mistake of allowing him to take the credit. I financed his first major development through a Fairchild-controlled fund. I protected his company during 2 serious financial crises. I paid Lynette's outstanding debts. I provided the investment that launched Corinne's beauty brand. I arranged private medical care when Warren needed a complicated heart procedure. The Winslow family believed their lifestyle was the result of Blake's brilliance. In reality, I had been hold him above water for years. I never asked for praise. I only wanted to know how they would treat me if they believed I had nothing to offer. That evening, they had given me the answer. The elevator doors opened into my underground office. Secure computer screens lined one wall. Financial records filled locked cabinets. Satellite conference systems connected directly to Fairchild offices around the country. On the far side of the room, a dark green phone rested inside a locked desk. I picked it up and called Graham Voss, our chief legal officer. He answered immediately. Ems. Fairchild. Only a handful of people addressed me by that name. Is everything ready for tonight? I asked. The board is seated. The presentation has been loaded. The audit report is complete. I looked at the water stain on my sleeve. Moved Blake Winslow's table directly in front of the stage. Graham was quiet for a moment. Hay will assume we are announcing an expanded partnership. That is exactly what I want him to assume. And the internal files? For 8 months, our audit team had been reviewing irregular activity inside Blake's company, Winslow Urban Development. At first, the numbers looked like poor management. Then we found unauthorized transfers. After that came altered reports, inflated invoices, and payments to an outside consulting company controlled by Sloan. Graham had urged me to act months earlier. I delayed. Part of me still wanted an explanation. Part of me still wanted to believe my husband had become careless, not dishonest. Then our team found recorded meetings in which Blake discussed giving me misleading documents to sign. That discovery almost ended the marriage by itself. But I still waited. I told myself I needed to understand the full truth before making a decision. Now the full truth had kissed Sloan beside the limousine and left me standing behind a kitchen window. "Release everything," I said. Graham's voice remained calm. "Including the recordings? Including everything? There is one more matter." "What is it?" "We intercepted a draft legal strategy prepared by an outside consultant. Mr. Winslow was building a case to argue that you were emotionally unstable and unable to manage complex assets." My fingers tightened around the phone. I had known he was preparing separation documents. I had not known he planned to attack my ability to control my own life. "What evidence did he intend to use?" I asked. "Private therapy notes he did not have legal access to, edited statements from household staff, several false reports describing you as confused and dependent." For one moment, the office seemed too quiet. I remembered every evening Blake had encouraged me to talk honestly about stress. I remembered him telling me that marriage should be a safe place. I remembered believing him. He had turned my trust into material for a legal plan. "Add it to the presentation," I said. Graham exhaled. "Are you certain?" "Yes. Then the ballroom will know everything. That is the first honest thing Blake and I will have shared in years." I ended the call. Beyond the office was a private dressing room. A sapphire gown waited inside. Beside it rested my grandmother's diamond necklace. I stood in front of the gown for several seconds. Then I thought about the broken crystal. I thought about Blake telling me that some women stood beside power while others kept the house running. I thought about Sloane's hand on his arm. And I made one decision. I would not enter that ballroom as the wife they had left behind. I would enter as the woman they had spent 8 years failing to see. While I prepared, Blake was arriving at the Coastal Vision benefit. I learned the details later from the event recordings. Photographers called his name as he stepped from the limousine with Sloan. One reporter asked whether she was Mrs. Winslow. Blake did not correct him. Instead, he moved closer to her and smiled. Corinne live-streamed their entrance. "My brother is about to enter the biggest chapter of his career," she told her followers. "Some people are born to lead." An event coordinator guided the family toward the central table directly below the stage. That table was normally reserved for Fairchild Capital executives, major donors, and special guests. Blake immediately understood the placement as a sign of favor. He leaned toward Sloan. "They are going to expand our partnership," he whispered. "How large?" she asked. "Possibly $200 million, maybe more." Sloan smiled. "Then tomorrow we stop pretending," Blake answered. "The separation documents are already being prepared." Lynette lifted her glass. "Arden will accept whatever you offer. Give her a small apartment and enough money to start over. She should be grateful." Warren sat beside her. "You are speaking as though Arden has no feelings," he said. Lynette turned toward him. "Do not become sentimental now. That woman has enjoyed this family's generosity for years." None of them noticed the microphones built into the table decorations. The event's broadcast system recorded every word. At 9:42, the ballroom lights dimmed. I was waiting at the top of the grand staircase behind closed doors. I could hear the host speaking below. He announced Fairchild Capital's new national program for community medical clinics, affordable family housing, clean energy projects, and rural scholarships. Then he paused. "For many years," he said, "the founder and chairwoman of Fairchild Capital has chosen privacy over public attention. Tonight, she has decided to step forward." My heart began to pound, not because I was afraid of Blake, because I was about to let an entire room see the part of my life I had protected for more than a decade. The doors opened. Warm light filled the staircase. I stepped forward. For several seconds, the ballroom was completely silent. I saw Blake first. He stood so quickly that his chair struck the table behind him. Sloane's hand slipped from his arm. Lynette stared at me as if she were looking at a stranger. Corinne lowered her phone, but her live stream continued. Blake's lips moved. That cannot be her. I descended slowly. My sapphire gown moved across the steps. My grandmother's necklace caught the light. 2 members of my executive security team followed several feet behind me. One by one, the guests stood. Applause spread across the ballroom. I reached the stage and stepped behind the microphone. For a brief moment, I looked out at hundreds of faces. Then I looked directly at my husband. My grandmother taught me that wealth does not create character. I began. It simply removes the need for some people to hide who they have always been. The room became quiet. Blake moved away from the table. Arden, please. We should talk privately. I raised one hand. He stopped. 8 years ago, I continued. I married a man who once sat beside me in a crowded roadside cafe during a thunderstorm. He told me kindness mattered more than status. He promised his family would become my family. I looked toward Lynette and Corinne. I believed him. Blake's face tightened. I concealed my position because I wanted a real marriage. I wanted to know whether I could be loved without my company, my inheritance, or my family name. Lynette stood. This is clearly a misunderstanding. I turned toward the large screen behind me. Then tonight is the perfect opportunity to correct it. The first financial document appeared. It showed a series of payments from Winslow Urban Development to a consulting company registered under Sloane's name. Then came inflated construction invoices, unauthorized loans, altered reports, private expenses charged to investment accounts. Quiet conversations moved across the ballroom. Sloane looked at Blake. You told me those payments were executive bonuses. Do not speak, he said. I continued. Over the past 3 years, Mr. Winslow used investment funds from Fairchild, controlled partnerships to secure loans without proper authorization. He approved payments for services that were never delivered. He altered risk reports and presented false projections to investors. Another document appeared. Lynette Winslow signed 4 agreements as a witness. Corinne Winslow received marketing payments for campaigns that were never completed. Corinne's face changed. She stopped her live stream. It was already too late. Thousands of people had watched my entrance and the first part of the presentation. Many had recorded it. Warren turned toward his wife. You told me the papers I signed were connected to my medical care. Lynette looked away. Graham joined me on stage carrying a gray folder. 1 month ago, he said, Mr. Winslow attempted to use shares connected to Fairchild Capital as security for an additional loan. Blake pointed toward me. She is my wife. Those shares are marital property. Graham did not raise his voice. The shares were placed in a protected family trust 12 years before your marriage. You have never had legal authority over them. The screen changed. A recording from Blake's office began playing. Blake appeared beside his chief accountant. Arden never studies the documents I give her, the recorded Blake said. Tell her the papers concern the house. She will sign them. The real Blake went still. The accountant asked, What happens if she asks questions? She will not. She trusts me. Hearing the recording inside my underground office had hurt. Hearing it in the ballroom hurt differently. It sounded colder in front of strangers, more final. He had not considered my trust a gift. He had considered it a weakness. Sloane suddenly opened her handbag and removed a small storage drive. I have copies of additional meetings, she said. Blake turned toward her. You are making a serious mistake. You were preparing to blame the payments on me, she replied. I saw the messages you sent to the board. Then she looked at me. He also hired a private consultant to build misleading personal reports about you. He wanted to argue that you should not be allowed to make important financial decisions. The room became completely silent again. I had already learned about the strategy from Graham, but hearing Sloane confirm it made the betrayal feel fresh. Blake stepped toward the stage. I was under pressure. I made mistakes. I looked down at him. A mistake is forgetting an appointment. A mistake is taking the wrong road. What you did required planning. You do not understand the pressure I was carrying. I understand it better than anyone. I paid for it. His eyes moved around the ballroom. He was searching for sympathy. He found none. Then the final recording began. It was Blake speaking with the outside consultant. Once she is isolated, he said she will accept the settlement. Arden does not fight. She disappears into herself. The consultant asked, and if she has assets you do not know about? Blake laughed. She does not. Everything she has came from me. A strange calm settled over me. For 8 years, I had wondered whether Blake truly loved me at the beginning. I still believe part of him had, but that man had been gone for a long time. The man standing below the stage loved access, admiration, and control. He loved the version of me that made his life easier. He did not love the whole person. You believed my quiet nature made me easy to erase, I said. Blake lowered his voice. Arden, think about the beginning. What we had was real. I felt sadness move through me, not weakness. Sadness. I have thought about the beginning for years. That memory is the reason I stayed long after your behavior told me to leave. Lynette rushed toward the stage. Arden, you cannot do this to your own family. A family does not humiliate someone for years and then demand loyalty when the truth becomes inconvenient. We gave you the Winslow name. I looked at her, and the Fairchild name paid for the home where you treated me like unpaid staff. The screen changed again. A property document appeared. The mansion in Naples belongs to a Fairchild Capital property company, I explained. The headquarters of Winslow Urban Development was purchased through one of my funds. Warren's medical care was paid through the Fairchild Foundation. Lynette's debts were settled from my private accounts. Corinne's brand was launched with money I approved. Corinne covered her mouth. Lynette lowered herself into a chair. Every symbol you used to convince yourselves that you were superior to me was supported by accounts I controlled. Blake climbed the first step toward the stage. Then, in front of the entire ballroom, he dropped to one knee. Arden, I lost my way, but I still love you. A quiet sound of disbelief moved through the audience. I looked at him. When you believed I had nothing, you chose someone else. You allowed your family to treat me like I was unworthy of sitting beside you. We can repair this. You are not asking to repair our marriage. You are asking to recover access to the life you thought belonged to you. That is not true. Then answer one question. He stared at me. Would you be on your knees if I had entered this ballroom in the same stained blouse I was wearing when you left me behind? He opened his mouth. No answer came. That silence told the truth more clearly than any speech. Graham handed him 2 folders. The first contains a separation agreement, I said. The second contains the board's decision removing you as chief executive of Winslow Urban Development. Blake stared at me. You cannot take my company. I am not taking it. Fairchild Capital controls 64% of the voting interest. You placed the company at risk each time you altered a report, redirected a payment, or signed a misleading agreement. You built nothing there. I almost smiled. Your first development would have failed without my financing. Your second project survived because I covered the debt. Your third expansion existed because my fund approved the land purchase. I stepped away from the microphone and looked directly into his eyes. I did not take your company, Blake. I spent years saving it from you. Security moved closer. Blake looked toward Sloane. She stepped back. He looked toward Lynette. She stared at the table. He looked toward Warren. His father did not move. For the first time, Blake had no one left to perform for. The gala continued after he was escorted from the ballroom. I remained on stage and announced the new community programs. I spoke about housing, healthcare, and education, but inside I felt strangely empty. Public victory does not erase private grief. That night I had ended my marriage, exposed financial misconduct, and reclaimed my name. I had also buried the final hope that the man I married still existed somewhere inside the man who betrayed me. After the speeches, I returned to a private room behind the stage. The door closed. Only then did I cry. I cried for the woman I had been at 29. I cried for the roadside cafe and the thunderstorm. I cried for every dinner I served while Lynette criticized me. I cried for every time Warren looked uncomfortable and stayed silent. I cried for every secret payment I made because I believed love meant protecting people from consequences. Graham stood quietly near the door. When I finally looked up, he handed me a glass of water. Was I wrong to do it publicly? I asked. He considered the question. No. The fraud involved public investors, public claims, and a charity event built around trust. But the marriage was yours. Only you can decide how you feel about that part. I nodded. That answer helped more than reassurance would have. The financial review continued for months. Blake was required to answer formal questions about altered documents, unauthorized transactions, and improper use of company funds. Sloane cooperated with investigators and provided additional records. Her own role was also reviewed. She had accepted payments she should have questioned, and she had participated in the affair. Cooperation did not erase responsibility. Lynette sold jewelry and several expensive possessions to cover personal expenses. Corinne disappeared from social media for months. When she returned, she no longer presented herself as an heiress. She accepted a junior position at a small advertising agency where her last name opened no doors. Warren moved into a modest apartment near the coast. 3 months after the gala, he sent me a handwritten letter. He admitted that he had noticed the way Lynette, Blake, and Corinne treated me. He said he stayed quiet because he disliked conflict. He told himself the situation was not his responsibility. I read the letter twice. Then I replied with one sentence. Silence may feel harmless to the person choosing it, but it never feels harmless to the person left standing alone. I did not offer immediate forgiveness. I offered honesty. That was more useful. The Naples mansion remained legally under my control. I never moved back. At first, I planned to sell it. Then I walked through the kitchen one final time. The floor had been repaired where the crystal bowl shattered. The counters were empty. The table where I served dinner for years stood beneath a layer of dust. I remembered how small I had felt inside that enormous house. And I made a different decision. I transformed the mansion into a residential support center for women rebuilding their lives after emotional manipulation, financial control, or years of being made to feel invisible. The formal dining room became a counseling and education space. The guest rooms became peaceful bedrooms. The library became a legal resource center. The gardens became a quiet place for residents to walk, think, and begin again. And the large kitchen, where I once cleaned broken crystal alone, became the heart of the building. And women cooked together there. They shared stories. They planned careers. They filled out school applications. They laughed. The room that once held my deepest humiliation became a place where other people recovered their dignity. Near the entrance, I placed a bronze plaque. It read, "Your value remains even when others refuse to see it." 1 year after the gala, I returned to the Coastal Vision benefit. This time, I wore a simple navy dress and no expensive jewelry. A reporter asked whether I regretted exposing Blake in front of so many people. I thought carefully before answering. I regret believing humility required me to remain silent. Kindness does not require self-erasure. Privacy does not give another person permission to rewrite your life. The reporter asked whether I still believed in love. Yes, I said, but I no longer confuse love with endless tolerance. That was the greatest lesson of my marriage. Blake did not lose me when I walked down the ballroom staircase. He lost me each time he allowed his mother to insult me. He lost me every night he chose secrecy over honesty. He lost me when he treated my trust as something he could use. And he lost me completely when he believed a woman without visible wealth deserved less respect than a woman with influence. The greatest revelation of that evening was not that I controlled Fairchild Capital. It was that Blake needed to discover my fortune before he could recognize my worth. People often reveal their true character through the way they treat someone they believe has no power, money, or important connections. A quiet person is not always a powerless person. Sometimes silence comes from patience. Sometimes it comes from observation. And sometimes it is the final moment before a person decides they will never accept disrespect again. I spent years protecting a marriage that had already stopped protecting me. Walking away did not mean those years were worthless. It meant I finally stopped sacrificing my future to defend my memories. Consequences are not cruelty when they grow directly from deliberate choices. Accountability does not destroy a person. It only removes the protection that secrecy once provided. My strongest revenge was not the board vote. It was not the public exposure. It was not the mansion, the company, or the fortune. My strongest revenge was becoming impossible to erase. And the house where they once left me behind became the place where other women learned how to move forward. Thank you for listening to my story. If it reminded you of the importance of self-respect, honesty, and knowing your worth, please support the channel by liking this video and subscribing. I would also love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe I handled the situation correctly? Or would you have chosen a different path? Thank you again for being here, and I will see you in the next video. Never beg someone to see your value. The right people will recognize it before they ever discover what you own.